Lieutenant Jihoon pressed his back against the broken concrete wall, trying to stop the blood flowing from his chest. The metal in his armor was still hot from the alien weapon that had hit him. Around him, the once beautiful New Seoul colony looked like a graveyard. Buildings that used to house thousands of families were now just piles of broken stone and twisted metal. His breathing came in short, painful gasps. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs. The small computer in his helmet kept beeping with warnings about his life support systems failing. Red lights flashed in his vision, telling him what he already knew: he was dying. 3 hours ago, Jihoon had been laughing with his squadmates as they shared pictures of their families back on Earth. Now, all of them were gone. He had watched each one fall to the Viridian weapons, their screams still echoing in his mind. The aliens had come without warning, their ships appearing in the sky like dark clouds bringing death. The Viridians were not like the aliens in old movies. They did not come in peace or want to learn about humans. They came with weapons that could melt through the strongest human armor, like it was paper. Their energy blasts did not just kill. They destroyed everything they touched, leaving wounds that would not heal no matter what medicine the humans used. Jihoon had been leading his squad through the residential district, helping families escape, to the underground shelters. Children were crying, parents were carrying whatever they could grab, and old people were struggling to keep up. His job was to buy them time, to hold back the alien advance long enough for the civilians to reach safety. They had done their job. The evacuation routes were clear now, and the transport ships had taken off with thousands of people. But the cost had been everything. His entire squad was gone, and now Jihoon was alone among the ruins, feeling his life slipping away drop by drop. The nanobots in his bloodstream were supposed to fix any injury, to keep soldiers fighting even when badly hurt. But these alien energy burns were different. The nanobots just died when they tried to repair the damage. It was like the Viridian weapons were designed specifically to kill humans in the most effective way possible. Jihoon could hear the sound of alien footsteps getting closer. The Viridians made a clicking noise when they walked, their metal boots hitting the ground in perfect rhythm. They were probably coming to check if any humans were still alive, to finish what they had started. He tried to reach for his rifle, but his arm would not obey him anymore. The weapon lay just a few feet away, but it might as well have been on another planet. His vision was getting blurry, and dark spots were dancing at the edges of his sight. In his pocket, there was a picture of his younger sister Minji. She was only 16, still in school back on Earth, dreaming of becoming a teacher. He had promised her he would come home safe, that the war would be over soon and they could go to the beach together like they used to when they were kids. Now that promise would be broken, just like everything else in this war. The clicking footsteps stopped nearby. Jihoon could hear breathing that was not human, could smell something sharp and metallic in the air. One of them had found him. Nira moved through the destroyed colony with the silent steps of a trained killer. Her silver armor reflected no light, designed to blend with shadows and debris. As a Viridian combat medic, she had seen countless battlefields, but something about this human settlement felt different. The destruction was complete, yet there had been resistance here that impressed even her warrior mind. She followed her, scanners readings, checking for any surviving humans who might still pose a threat. The Viridian Empire had strict orders: no prisoners, no survivors. This was supposed to be a clean sweep, preparing the colony for Viridian occupation. But as Nira walked through the ruins, she began to understand why this small human outpost had held out for so long against impossible odds. The human soldiers had not run when the bombardment started. Instead, they had formed defensive lines to protect civilians. Nira found evidence of their final stand: bodies positioned to shield evacuation routes, weapons emptied completely. Some soldiers who had continued fighting even after suffering. Wounds that should have killed them instantly. Her scanner beeped softly, detecting a human life sign nearby. Weak, but still alive. Nira raised her weapon and moved toward the signal, expecting to find a wounded soldier hiding like a coward. Instead, she found something that made her stop completely. The human was propped against a broken wall, blood covering his chest armor. His breathing was shallow and labored, his skin pale from blood loss, but his eyes were still filled with fire. Even as he lay dying, he was slowly, painfully trying to reach for his weapon. His fingers stretched toward the rifle, determined to keep fighting until his very last breath. This was not the behavior Neera had been taught to expect from humans. Her commanders had told her that humans were weak, that they would surrender quickly when faced with superior Viridian technology. They were supposed to be cowards who valued their individual lives above everything else. But this dying soldier was proving everything wrong. He could barely move, could barely breathe, yet he was still trying to fight. There was something in his expression that Neera had never seen before, a refusal to give up that went beyond logic, beyond survival instinct. It was pure determination, burning like a flame that would not go out even in the face of certain death. For the first time in her military career, Neera hesitated. She should have ended his suffering quickly and moved on. That was the efficient thing to do, the proper thing according to Viridian protocol. But something about this human's courage touched a part of her mind that she did not understand. In Viridian culture, warriors were taught to respect strength and honor. This dying human, refusing to surrender, even when defeat was absolute, displayed both qualities in ways that demanded acknowledgement. Neera found herself lowering her weapon, studying the soldier's face more carefully. She noticed how young he was, probably barely into his 20s. In his pocket, she could see the corner of what looked like a photograph. Even facing death, he was thinking of someone he cared about. The idea of fighting not just for duty or orders, but for love and protection was something Viridians understood, but rarely experienced. Her medical scanner showed the extent of his injuries. The energy burns from Viridian weapons were specifically designed to prevent human healing systems from working. He would be dead within minutes, and there was nothing conventional medicine could do to save him. But Neera knew of one possibility, something forbidden, dangerous, and against every rule of Viridian military law. Jihoon's eyes opened to unfamiliar ceiling tiles and the soft hum of alien technology. His hand immediately went to his chest, expecting to find the gaping wounds that should have killed him. Instead, his fingers touched smooth, unbroken skin. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange tingling sensation that seemed to flow through his entire body like electricity. He sat up quickly, then immediately regretted it as his head spun with dizziness. The room around him was clearly not human-made. The walls curved in ways that human architecture never did, and soft blue lights pulsed gently from surfaces that looked like living metal. Medical equipment hummed quietly in corners, but nothing looked familiar to his Earth Defense Corps training. That was when he felt it, a presence in his mind that was definitely not his own. It was like having someone standing just behind his shoulder, except the sensation was inside his thoughts. Warm, careful, and unmistakably alien. Without knowing how, Jihoon understood that this presence belonged to the Viridian who had saved his life. Her name came to him without being spoken, Neera. He could sense her location somewhere in the same building, could feel her emotional state like it was his own. She was nervous, worried, and dealing with something that felt like guilt mixed with determination. The connection was so clear that it frightened him. More disturbing were the new thoughts and knowledge that seemed to be floating in his mind like puzzle pieces. He found himself understanding Viridian military tactics, knowing the weak points in their armor designs, and recognizing the sound patterns of their language, even though he had never learned it. Information that should have taken years of study was simply there, as if it had always been part of his memory. Jihoon tried to stand and found his body responding differently than before. His reflexes were faster, his balance more precise, and his senses sharper than they had ever been. When he looked at his hands, he could see the faint pattern of veins beneath his skin had changed color, now carrying a slight silver tint that had not been there before. Meanwhile, across the building, Neera was struggling with her own transformation. Emotions that Viridians normally kept buried under layers of military discipline were now hitting her with the force of ocean waves. She had always known concepts like mercy and compassion existed, but experiencing them firsthand was overwhelming. When she thought about the human soldiers she had killed during the attack on New Sol Colony, she felt something her people called heart sickness, a crushing weight of regret that made it hard to breathe. Viridian warriors were taught that enemy deaths were simply necessary steps toward victory. But now she could imagine the families those soldiers had left behind, could picture children waiting for parents who would never come home. Even worse was the hope that kept bubbling up in her thoughts. Hope that the war could end differently, that there might be solutions beyond conquest and destruction. Such thinking was considered a dangerous weakness in Viridian military culture, yet she could not stop herself from imagining peaceful alternatives to the conflict. The bond between them had created something unprecedented in galactic history. Neither human nor Viridian scientists had ever documented anything like it. They were no longer entirely members of their original species, but something new, something that carried the strengths of both races while challenging the fundamental beliefs of each. Jihoon and Nira first discovered the true extent of their connection during a training session in the hidden facility. What started as simple combat practice quickly became something extraordinary that neither of them had expected. When Jihoon moved to attack, Nira instinctively knew exactly where his strike would land before he even started the motion. But instead of simply defending, she found herself responding with counterattacks that perfectly complemented his fighting style. It was as if they had trained together for years, each movement flowing naturally into the next, like a deadly dance. The real surprise came when they faced multiple combat drones programmed to test their abilities. Individually, each of them could handle maybe 2 or 3 of the machines. But together, something amazing happened. Jihoon would create chaos and confusion with unpredictable human tactics, while Nira would strike with surgical precision at exactly the right moment. The drones, designed to handle either human randomness or Viridian efficiency, could not adapt to both happening at the same time. Through their mental link, they could share information instantly. When Jihoon spotted a weakness in the drone's armor, Nira knew about it immediately and could exploit it without any spoken communication. When Nira calculated the perfect angle for an attack, Jihoon could position himself to create that opportunity, without being told what to do. Their fighting style became completely unique. Jihoon would charge in with the wild creativity that made human soldiers so dangerous, confusing enemies who expected predictable patterns. Then, while the enemies were trying to figure out what he would do next, Nira would strike with the cold efficiency that made Viridian warriors so feared. The combination was devastating. But the bond revealed much more than just combat advantages. During quiet moments between training sessions, deeper memories began to surface through their connection. Nira's mind held information that shocked Jihoon to his core and explained everything about why this war had started. The Viridian Empire was not expanding across the galaxy because they wanted more territory or resources. They were running for their lives from something called the Devourers, ancient machines that had appeared in Viridian space decades ago and had been consuming everything in their path ever since. Through Nira's memories, Jihoon saw the horror of entire Viridian worlds being stripped down to bare rock by swarms of self-replicating machines. The Devourers did not negotiate, did not communicate, and could not be reasoned with. They simply arrived, consumed all organic life and useful materials, then moved on to the next target while leaving behind dead, empty planets. The Viridian Empire had lost nearly half of their territory to these machines. Billions of Viridians had died trying to stop them, but conventional weapons barely slowed the swarms down. The machines learned from every battle, adapting their designs to counter whatever tactics were used against them. The invasion of human space was not about conquest, it was about survival. The Viridian leadership had decided that they needed human territory to relocate their remaining population before the Devourers finished consuming their homeworlds. But Viridian pride prevented them from asking for help or explaining the situation. Instead, they had chosen to take what they needed by force, believing that humans were too primitive to be useful allies against such an advanced threat. Now, through their bond, Jihoon and Nira could see a different possibility. Human creativity combined with Viridian technology might be exactly what was needed to find weaknesses in the Devourer designs that pure logic had missed. But first, they had to survive long enough to convince 2 species to stop fighting each other and face the real enemy together. The full truth hit Ji-hoon like a physical blow when Nira's deepest memories finally opened to him. He was sitting in the small room they had given him when suddenly he was not on the hidden medical station anymore. Instead, he was standing on a Viridian world called Keth Prime, watching through Nira's eyes as the sky turned black with mechanical death. The Devourers had arrived without warning, just like they always did. One moment, Keth Prime was a thriving world with floating cities and crystal forests that sparkled in the light of twin suns. The next moment, the sky was filled with machines that looked like metal insects the size of battleships, each one spawning smaller versions of itself as it fed on everything below. Ji-hoon felt Nira's terror as a child, watching her home being dismantled piece by piece. The machines did not simply destroy, they harvested. Every building, every tree, every living creature was broken down into basic materials and transformed into more Devourers. The beautiful crystal forests became raw silicon for computer circuits. The floating cities became metal plating for new machine bodies. What made it worse was how intelligent the Devourers were. They learned from every defense the Viridians tried. Energy shields that worked once would be useless the second time as the machines adapted their weapons. Battle tactics that saved one city would fail completely when tried elsewhere, because the Devourers had already figured out countermeasures. Through the memory link, Ji-hoon experienced the evacuation of Keth Prime. Millions of Viridians fleeing in massive ships while their world died behind them. Nira had been only 12 years old, pressed against a window watching her planet being consumed, knowing she would never see her home again. But that was just one world. The memories kept coming, showing him dozens of other Viridian planets that had fallen to the mechanical swarms. Each time the Empire's military had tried to make a stand, each time they had failed. The Devourers always won because they could think faster, adapt quicker, and rebuild their losses automatically. The worst part was the speed of it all. A Devourer fleet could strip an entire planet bare in just a few months. They would arrive, establish production facilities, then spread out like cancer until nothing organic remained. The machines did not even seem to have a goal beyond consumption and replication. They were like a disease that infected star systems. Ji-hoon understood now why the Viridian Empire had seemed so desperate during their attacks on human colonies. They were not conquerors seeking glory. They were refugees running from an enemy that could not be fought with conventional weapons. The invasion of human space was their last chance to find somewhere safe to rebuild their civilization. But Viridian pride had made them choose the worst possible approach. Instead of explaining the threat and asking for help, they had decided to take what they needed by force. Their military leaders believed that humans were too primitive to understand the Devourer threat, much less help fight against it. That belief was completely wrong, and Ji-hoon could see why through his bond with Nira. Human thinking worked differently than Viridian logic. Where Viridians saw patterns and tried to optimize solutions, humans saw chaos and found creative ways to exploit it. The Devourers were perfect logical machines, which meant they probably had blind spots that only illogical human thinking could find. The bond between him and Nira proved that the two species could work together in ways that made both stronger. Human unpredictability combined with Viridian precision had created fighting abilities that neither could achieve alone. The hunt began 3 days after Ji-hoon and Nira escaped from the medical facility. Both sides wanted them dead, but for different reasons that showed how badly each species misunderstood what they had become. Human military intelligence classified Ji-hoon as a compromised asset. They believed the Viridians had somehow brainwashed him or implanted control devices in his brain during his captivity. The idea that he might have formed a genuine bond with an alien was impossible for them to accept. To his former commanders, Ji-hoon was now a walking security breach who knew too many Earth Defense Corps secrets. The Viridian Empire was even more direct in their condemnation. Nira had committed the ultimate act of treason by sharing sacred Viridian blood with an enemy. According to their military law, she deserved execution not just for herself, but for contaminating their genetic heritage. Her superiors saw the bond as a disgusting corruption that had to be eliminated before it could spread to other warriors. Neither side understood that Jihoon and Nira had become something entirely new, something that could save both species if given the chance. The chase led them through the underground tunnels beneath the ruins of New Seoul Colony. Jihoon knew these passages from his childhood, when he and his sister Minji had explored them during family visits to the outer colonies. Now those same tunnels were his lifeline, hiding him from the heat sensors and tracking devices that both armies were using to hunt them down. Their combined abilities made them incredibly difficult to catch. Jihoon's human intuition would tell him when something felt wrong about a particular route, while Nira's Viridian tactical training would analyze exactly why it was dangerous. When human soldiers got close, Nira could predict their movement patterns from her knowledge of Earth military doctrine. When Viridian patrols appeared, Jihoon's unpredictable thinking helped them escape in ways the aliens never expected. But they were not alone in this strange transformation. As they moved through the underground network, they began encountering others like themselves, soldiers from both sides who had been changed by emergency medical treatment during the war. There was Doyun, a human engineer who had been saved by a Viridian field medic after a transport crash. The blood transfusion had given him an intuitive understanding of alien technology that made him incredibly valuable for gathering intelligence. He could hack Viridian communication systems by simply touching their control panels, his human creativity, finding backdoors that the logical alien designers had never considered. On the Viridian side, they found Kess, a warrior who had received human blood plasma during a critical surgery. The transfusion had awakened emotions in her that Viridian society tried to suppress, but it had also given her the ability to think outside rigid military protocols. She could anticipate human tactics not through analysis, but through genuine empathy and understanding. Each bonded individual brought unique abilities to their growing network. Some could sense approaching enemies from miles away. Others could communicate across vast distances without using any technology. A few had developed enhanced reflexes that made them nearly impossible to capture in direct combat. Most importantly, they all shared information instantly through their mental connections. When one discovered evidence of the approaching devourer threat, the knowledge spread to the entire network within hours. They began building a complete picture of the mechanical invasion that was coming, one that neither human nor Viridian leadership was prepared for. The network operated like a ghost organization, appearing and disappearing throughout the war zone while both armies focused on fighting each other instead of recognizing the real threat approaching their galaxy. The alerts came in at 347 hours, screaming across every communication channel in human space. Long-range sensors had detected something impossible, a fleet of ships that did not match any known design, moving at speeds that defied conventional physics. Within minutes, both human and Viridian forces stopped shooting at each other and turned their attention to the newcomers approaching from deep space. Jihoon felt the ice-cold terror flowing through Nira's mind before the first reports even reached them. Through their bond, he experienced her childhood nightmares made real. The mechanical swarm that had consumed her homeworld was here, in human space, ready to begin the harvest all over again. The Devourer scout fleet consisted of only 12 ships. But size meant nothing when dealing with self-replicating machines. Each vessel immediately began consuming the asteroid belt around the outer planets, breaking down rock and metal into raw materials for construction. Within the first hour, 12 ships had become 24. By the end of the day, the number had grown to nearly 100. Human commanders tried everything they knew. Fighter squadrons launched coordinated attacks using tactics that had worked against Viridian forces. The Devourers simply adapted, their defensive systems learning from each strike and becoming immune to the same approach. Energy weapons that destroyed 3 machines would be completely ineffective against the 4th, as if the entire swarm shared a collective memory. The Viridian response was just as futile. Their most advanced battleships, armed with weapons that could crack planets, focused their fire on the largest Devourer constructs. The machines absorbed the energy, analyzed the weapon signatures, then used that same technology to improve their own defensive capabilities. Every attack only made them stronger. What made the situation truly terrifying was how fast the swarm learned and grew. The machines did not just copy successful designs, they improved them. Human stealth technology that took decades to develop was reverse-engineered in hours. Viridian energy shields that represented centuries of scientific advancement were cracked and enhanced by artificial intelligence that never slept, never tired, and never made the same mistake twice. But Jihoon and the other bonded individuals began to notice something that the regular military forces missed completely. The Devourers were perfect logical machines, which meant they had one critical weakness. They could not understand truly irrational behavior. During one desperate skirmish, Do-hyun had accidentally triggered what should have been a fatal malfunction in his stolen Viridian fighter. Instead of ejecting or trying to fix the problem, his human instincts made him do something completely crazy. He used the malfunction as a weapon, ramming his spinning, out-of-control ship into a Devourer construct at exactly the wrong angle and wrong speed. The machine tried to calculate the attack pattern and failed completely. It could not predict what Do-hyun would do because even Do-hyun did not know what he was going to do. The Devourer's defensive systems, designed to counter logical military tactics, were completely unprepared for pure chaos. That single moment of accidental success became the foundation for everything that followed. The bonded network began developing what they called chaos tactics, fighting techniques that combined human unpredictability with Viridian precision to create attacks that the Devourers could not learn from because they made no logical sense. Kes developed a fighting style where she would intentionally make tactical errors that somehow led to devastating strikes against machine weak points. The Devourers would try to adapt to her mistakes, only to find that she never made the same error twice, because she was not really making errors at all. The turning point came when Admiral Soo-young of the Earth Defense Corps watched her entire battle group get destroyed in less than 10 minutes. 36 of humanity's most advanced warships, reduced to floating scrap metal by machines that seemed to predict every move before it was made. She sat in her command chair, staring at the tactical display showing Devourer numbers growing exponentially, and realized that conventional warfare was not just failing, it was feeding the enemy. That same day, Commander Thex of the Viridian fleet experienced his own moment of crushing defeat. His pride, the battleship Eternal Victory, lay broken and drifting after what should have been a perfect tactical strike. The Devourers had not just countered his attack, they had used his own weapons against him, turning Viridian technology into tools for their harvest. Both leaders received the same message at almost the same time. It came through unofficial channels, from sources their intelligence services had been trying to capture for weeks. The bonded network was offering to demonstrate something that sounded impossible, a way to actually hurt the machines that were consuming their galaxy. The demonstration took place in the debris field of what used to be Mining Station Delta 7. Jihoon and Nira, along with 6 other bonded pairs, faced off against a Devourer harvesting unit that had been systematically destroying everything in the sector. Military observers from both species watched through long-range sensors, expecting to witness another futile sacrifice. Instead, they saw something that changed everything they thought they knew about warfare. The bonded teams moved, like they were connected by invisible strings. When Jihoon created chaos by attacking from an impossible angle, Nira was already in position to exploit the confusion with surgical precision. When Kes deliberately triggered what looked like a tactical disaster, Do-hyun somehow turned that disaster into a devastating strike against machine weak points. But the real breakthrough came when the teams began operating as a single networked consciousness. Through their mental bonds, they could share tactical information instantly, coordinate complex maneuvers without any communication delay, and adapt their strategies faster than the Devourers could analyze their patterns. The machines tried to learn from each attack, but every time they adapted to counter one bonded pair, 3 others would exploit the adaptation in ways the artificial intelligence had not predicted. Human creativity kept generating new chaos, while Viridian precision turned that chaos into effective weapons. For the first time since the Devourer invasion began, the machines were actually taking damage faster than they could repair themselves. The demonstration lasted only 20 minutes, but it was enough. When the bonded teams withdrew, they left behind something unprecedented, a section of space where devourer forces were actually retreating instead of advancing. Within hours, volunteers from both species were lining up to undergo the dangerous blood-sharing process. Not everyone survived the procedure, and many who did found the mental connection too overwhelming to handle, but enough succeeded to form the core of humanity's first truly integrated military force. The transformation was not just physical. Human soldiers who received Viridian blood found themselves thinking with new clarity and precision. Viridian warriors who accepted human transfusions discovered emotions and intuition they had never experienced before. Together, they became something greater than either species could achieve alone. Training centers were established on neutral stations where bonded pairs learned to fight as networked units. Human instructors taught Viridian precision fighters how to embrace chaos and unpredictability. Viridian tactical masters showed human creativity how to focus that chaos into devastating effectiveness. The combined fleet that emerged from these training programs was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The final battle against the Devourer main fleet lasted 3 days and changed the course of galactic history forever. When the mechanical swarm was finally destroyed, drifting in pieces around what used to be their massive construction platforms, both human and Viridian leaders realized they were witnessing the birth of something completely new. Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the Joint Command Ship Unity, watching the last Devourer fragments burn up in the atmosphere of a nearby planet. Through his bond with Nira, he could feel her mixture of relief and amazement. They had done the impossible, not just survived the mechanical apocalypse, but turned 2 warring species into allies strong enough to defeat an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy. The victory celebration was unlike anything either species had ever experienced. Human crews cheered and embraced their Viridian counterparts, while traditionally stoic Viridian warriors allowed themselves to show emotions they had discovered through their bonds with human partners. The rigid barriers between the 2 species were crumbling, replaced by something that felt more like an extended family than a military alliance. But Ji-hoon and Nira knew the real work was just beginning. The bonded network that had saved them, all was still experimental, still dangerous, and still barely understood by the scientists studying it. If this new form of cooperation was going to last, they needed to establish proper training and support systems for future generations. The first integrated combat academy was built on New Harmony Station, a massive space platform constructed jointly by human and Viridian engineers. The design itself represented their new partnership, human creativity and adaptability combined with Viridian precision and advanced technology. Corridors curved in graceful alien patterns, while housing familiar human comforts like recreation areas and family quarters. Ji-hoon became the Academy's first human instructor, teaching Viridian cadets how to embrace the chaos and unpredictability that made human tactics so effective. It was strange watching young Viridian warriors learn to trust their instincts instead of just following protocols, but the results were amazing. They developed fighting styles that no pure Viridian would have imagined possible. Nira took charge, teaching human recruits the mental discipline and tactical precision that Viridian culture had perfected over centuries. She helped hot-headed human pilots learn patience and strategic thinking, showing them how to channel their natural aggression into devastating effectiveness. The transformation was remarkable. Human creativity, guided by Viridian wisdom, created soldiers who could think 3 steps ahead, while still adapting instantly to changing situations. The bonding process itself became safer and more refined as they learned from each successful pair. Medical teams from both species worked together to understand exactly how the blood transfusions created the mental connections. They developed screening procedures to identify compatible volunteers and support systems to help new bonds adjust to their shared consciousness. Most importantly, they established the principle that would guide everything that followed. Bonding was always voluntary, always equal, and always respected. No one was forced to undergo the process, and bonded pairs were given the freedom to develop their connections at their own pace. The Academy's first graduating class consisted of 50 bonded pairs representing the best of both species. As Jihoon watched them receive their joint commissions, he thought about how far they had all come from that moment when he lay dying in the rubble of New Seoul Colony. The war that had nearly destroyed both civilizations had instead created something unprecedented, a partnership that made each species stronger while preserving what made them unique. Years later, when other alien species encountered the Human-Viridian Alliance, they found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about interstellar politics.